You are now listening to Soundspace, the podcast where we interview experts and professionals in the space of sound.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Soundspace, the podcast where we interview audio people. Today, we have a very special guest for you. We have Kasey Pocius, hailing from St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, a gender-fluid intermedia artist with deep knowledge in multimedia software. They have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Electroacoustic Studies, currently completing a Master's in Music Tech at McGill, has done classical training in piano and viola, was the principal violist for the Newfoundland Symphony Youth Orchestra, has experience with electronic works, has collaborated with the Concordia Laptop Orchestra, Exit Point, and Harmonique, a very talented multi-channel composer. I've got to listen to a bunch of their pieces before the podcast began, and also has worked as a technical coordinator at MatraLab. How are you, Kasey?
I'm good.
Thank you for coming on.
I'm busy with the MFA, as you mentioned.
Yes, the MFA must be very busy. Also with us is Anthony. How are you, Anthony?
I'm great. Thank you very much.
Very happy to have you all here. Kasey, I'd like to begin by asking you on this podcast, when did music become of importance to you? When did audio and music really play a factor and you knew that you would do music as a career?
I was really lucky. Music's been a huge part of my life since the beginning. Literally the beginning. I got to go to my first concert when I was 6 months old. It was a flamenco concert. And I just went to a lot of concerts as a kid. And then I was lucky. My mom had a Mac at home, so I started playing around with some of the audio software, GarageBand, and a little bit of iMovie as well, and starting in intermedia early too. I knew right away, it was so much fun. And then I, through the public school system, got started with viola, and then really got excited by that, started doing it privately, and originally sort of thought I was going to go into classical music and study that, and that was really my focus. But then I realized that as I got older, I started seeing other people were focusing in the digital audio stuff professionally, and I switched lanes and got into the stuff at Concordia.
Yes, we'll definitely get to. There's definitely going to be a big Concordia portion in this episode. Anthony and I met Kasey at the Electroacoustic program in Concordia, so we could definitely talk about that.
Sure, definitely. We met at Concordia. Actually, Kasey, you were probably one of my first friends in the program.
Likewise.
So describe your experience at Concordia in electroacoustics program.
It was really great. It was, the breadth of topics that we covered was really wide in terms of focusing on the ear and all this stuff with electroacoustic composition, music theory, all those things. And it's a super intense program at the beginning. And I was really lucky. Me and Anthony were one of the last years where Kevin Austin was teaching everything in terms of the composition tutorials and also the research writing portion of that course. Kevin was a great teacher, and we really got along well. And he was really willing to push me to work as hard as I could to really get my compositions really up there. And I also was lucky that Eldad Sabari, who was the ear training professor, and also worked with the laptop orchestra, we got along really well. And I was able to do a lot of work, independent studies with him, as well as stuff with the laptop orchestra and so forth. And then I was also really lucky. Electroacoustics it's in the Department of Fine Arts at Concordia, as opposed to some of these other audio programs where you're in the School of Music. When I knew that I really wanted to also work on my skills in video and working with building electronics and so forth as well, I was able to sneak into the intermedia department and start taking classes there, and really bringing up my skills in both sides of things, and took a little bit of math as well, and was able to get in eventually through to music technology at McGill.
Definitely.
That's amazing.
Before we hit on the McGill, because I definitely want to talk about that master's, which I applied to. I just want to say, I really think you hit on something very, very important. Where I tell this a lot to Anthony and people around me, that being an audio an audio person is important, but being a media person is even more important, and
definitely.
having more than just audio under your skill set. Can you expand on the importance of being a media person and what the difference is of being a media person and an audio person only?
Oh yeah. And I agree 100%. So you can really dig in and develop your skills for music theory and what have you. But with a lot of the jobs that you're doing now, especially that, I know both me and Jaian have had a lot of experience working with stuff for film, stuff for television, stuff for radio.
Right.
And I mean, even just having doing some basic video editing, or some basic special effects, or playing around with stop motion, or really whatever catches your fancy. It's going to help you develop a language to be able to communicate with these people. So even if you aren't the specialist in video for a project, you're still coming in with expectations that you can set pretty easily, because you know what can be accomplished within a certain set of time, and you're also just able to a lot more effectively ask what you want. I find as an audio person, sometimes when you're working with video only people, you can get some pretty vague questions about make your music more like this, or icier, and so forth. And it's you can kind of figure it out, but if you both have that language where you are both familiar with each other's mediums, it's a lot easier there. And that's outside of media too. I mean, doing a little bit of dance as a kid has really helped me get to work with dance companies here and so forth, because I already have some understanding of movement and so forth.
Wow,
right, naturally.
Dance. Wow,
yeah.
Naturally.
Dance is really interesting to me. How does that play a part in everything, in your practices and all the projects that you do? I've probably in Clark a little bit, I imagine.
Yeah, in Clark, and then also in the last. So this can help to specify some things. At Concordia, Clark is located within what is called the Performance Art Research Cluster, or Le Parc, which is part of a larger research network called Milieu. And I was really lucky. I got chosen as the undergraduate fellow. One of the first years that the program was run at Concordia for Le Parc. And through there, I was able to meet some students who were, MFAs and PhDs in dance, and we're also working in theater and these sorts of things. And I've been able, once I've graduated, to come back and continue to work with these people on some small projects over the pandemic. I did Sway of Stone with Lucy Fondel last fall, and then just recently a little short residency over the summer, again with Lucy Fondel for a project called Windy Days that we're probably going to expand on, fingers crossed, next summer as well.
Amazing.
So, and it's movement is a big part of also what I'm studying at McGill, but I'm trying to save some stuff for as we
I think
get
getting into
things.
McGill is the perfect segue here.
Yeah,
Music tech at McGill. I just want to say that is huge. That is huge.
That is.
Congratulations.
Very good.
Thank you.
How has it been so far? People
it's fantastic.
People listening to this will probably be listening to this in early 2022. What point are you at in the program? Just give us, the overview and what your experience is like over there.
Oh man. So early 2022. Hopefully by that point, I will be almost done my thesis. But we'll have to see. I'm trying to take a little bit of time with things, because I have the luxury to do so still at the moment. So the music technology program at McGill is more so focused into computer science, electrical engineering. It's a 2-year to 3-year master's program, and there's also a PhD after that if you wish to do the PhD as well. And it's focused around a series of different paths that you can really tailor to what your interests are. But you get a wide breadth of the starts of things, and then you can really pick on certain projects. And the thesis system is divided into a series of smaller laboratories where you work with other graduate students who are also focused in your interest. So there's Stephen McAdams heads a lab that's really focused on perception, and the psychoacoustic side of things, the psychology, running tests to really understand what can we hear and how does what we hear, how do we affect what we're hearing psychologically. There are people like Dr. Ichiro Fujinaga who are focused in machine learning, music recognition, how do we help the library handle 1 million scores that you might want to search to find specific music that has a specific character or was written in a specific set of years, and these sorts of things that seem obvious, but these tools still haven't been built. Or there are places like my lab my supervisor's lab, the Input Devices and Musical Interfaces Laboratory run by Dr. Marcelo Wanderley, where we're really focused on what is the interaction with the computer for making music. So, is that sonification, representations of data and understanding of data through music and through sound? Is that, interfaces like the T-Stick, which is a musical interface that is a tube that's filled with sensors, and it's touch sensitive, it's pressure sensitive, it's sensitive to how fast it's moving, what angles has it been rotated on, where is it moving. We also focus on development of things to enhance other instrumental performances. So things like Eduardo Menez, who's a PhD student at the lab, is working on a project called the Guitare Ami, which is a little set of sensors that you can add to a classical guitar, as well as a little Raspberry Pi based guitar pedal, where you can control what sort of synthesis and effects you want to add to the guitar in real time, and make it intuitive to what somebody would already want to do with a classical guitar. And then more sort of medically or psychology focused studies in like motion capture and studying how musicians move when they're playing instruments, and what can we understand from this, and what can we help them with in terms of like what do they want to improve in their practice, as well as concerns of how can we prevent injuries in practice and performance, and as well as how can we make things more accessible, how can we build instruments for people with various disabilities that are more accommodating of a wider group of players, and it gets even more philosophical. What does it mean to play? How do we make mappings? All these things. So
wow, it's very, very eclectic.
Oh yeah, that's a lot to unload
in a wonderful way.
I can only imagine.
Yeah,
and it's really great. The classes when you do those master seminars are really, really intense. We talk about in electroacoustics with Kevin Austin. Me and Anthony that first year wrote 25 reports over the course of a year. And in this case, you're doing like 25 reports in a term if you're lucky. For like each of your classes. Like Ichiro has this like crazy research seminar where you're like having to, write a multiple page report and then, turn it into basically like a conference presentation over like the course of 2 weeks. And then you're doing this every 2 weeks. And then you're also writing code and you're building all these projects. So it's super, super intense, but working at that level, really ups your abilities, and then you can find like what you are really interested in, where you want to keep things going, and then hone in on the thesis and spend a year or 2 years just researching and working with your supervisor and really creating something that's exciting and relevant to your colleagues in the field.
I know you somewhat answered it, but I was curious, what is your thesis?
Yeah, so my thesis topic is on interfaces for 3D spatialization. I'm kind of still honing in on how exactly this interface is going to look. Hopefully by the time this is out, I figured out this dance of how exactly it will work. But as I'm sure we'll talk about later, I really love multi-channel audio, spatial audio.
Yeah.
It was a huge focus at Concordia. Like as I've continued, I've gotten really into as well, like 3D audio. So at Concordia, we're just working in sort of what you see in like the older cinema stuff, 5.1, 7.1, just speakers that are like in front and behind the audience. And that's like a magical, wonderful experience of having speakers around the audience. But adding that extra level of, speakers above or speakers below the audience, thankfully it's been, embraced by the commercial market, stuff like Dolby Atmos. People are coming to have these experiences more frequently and are understanding that it is really groundbreaking and really great. But the thing is that it's really hard to produce good, rewarding content for spatial audio. With a mixing board, you got your pan pots, or you got maybe you got a joystick panner, like you see with some of the other surround sound stuff. But when you're moving stuff in 3D, We haven't really figured out those interfaces and those like gestural metaphors that we want to use. And there's a lot of really exciting research in the field. People out at the University of Calgary exploring a lot of stuff with motion capture and being able to move stuff, as well as some of my colleagues in sound recording at McGill are also looking at this. And there's all sorts of interesting interfaces that have been developed at IDMIL at McGill over the past 10 years. Marlon Schumacher, who's a graduate student there, did a lot of studies into this and implementing it into some more old school like C-sound computer music interfaces. But the thing is that like those are really specialized to like that one use case, and it's like for that one artist. And it's great. But when you're trying to bring it into other situations, motion capture is great. But if you have to hold your hands over the mixing board every time you want to listen to your piece, it gets to be a royal pain. And so I'm looking at like how can we manage moving around those objects and like give feedback as well. There's lots of great touch interfaces out there, stuff on the iPad that you can move stuff around spatially. But of course, you have to be looking at it. You're not getting any feedback that you can feel from like when you're moving a joystick or you're moving a pan pot, which when you're talking about like movie workflows and these sorts of things, the faster that you can get this stuff done and get stuff sent out, the happier your supervisors are. And sadly, it's shorter and shorter production time spans on everything, especially, with companies like Netflix producing these really high quality miniseries in like 6 weeks, 8 weeks. It basically just means you have to go for, what's fast, what's accessible, what you can keep working with. So I'm trying to sort of crack that egg, if you will. And some things are coming together. I've been working with some stuff with electromagnets and motion capture, where it's a more contained system that you can like physically feel your objects and place them around the space. But some of these systems they're a little wonky just because they aren't made for these exact use cases. So I'm playing around with what exactly still I want to use with sensors and so forth to really bring this thing to life. And then it's great if it's good for me. I need to test with other people, get my colleagues at IDMIL to get their hands on stuff. And there's a wonderful, wide variety of backgrounds, from people focused in audio to, people with computer science and electrical engineering backgrounds that are coming into McGill, who are going to bring a different viewpoint on it. And it's good to get everybody, all these different backgrounds to look at it, because it makes your projects that much stronger. You aren't just toiling away on your own, sort of reinforcing your own biases.
Absolutely. It's always nice to get a second viewpoint from people from different programs.
Yeah.
Just to get different.
I want to ask you a question. Talking about perspectives. When I worked at a studio last year, all the other engineers were so used to stereo, and then when asked about when I brought up doing 5-channel compositions, some of them never worked in multi-channel or immersive audio or 3D audio, any of those domains, and the concern that always came up was, I can't even imagine the phase. Like, that was like such a red flag for them that they wouldn't even think about jumping into that domain. So for someone who really has only experienced engineering audio in stereo, what would you say to them regarding 5.1 or any of these multi-channel and 3D sound domains?
I mean, phase is a funky phenomenon that I think
well said.
We worry about a whole lot. But at the end of the day, with 5-channel, phase isn't a huge issue. There's some of these technologies are definitely like super reliant on phase, wave field synthesis and these like crazy high definition 3D sound stuff that you like really, really, really have to worry about your phase. But often it's not that much of a problem. Really, like we're taught at Concordia, which the two of you will know. It really only matters if it sounds good. Which like we're big fans of at IDMIL as well. You can have all this super technical thoughts of like, it's going to be this tiny amount of phase, and I'm going to get like some like a third of a harmonic that I don't like, or some like weird concern there. But it's not that big of a deal, really. And I mean, the thing is, like, at the end of the day, most people are going to be listening on headphones, which is, I mean, I love like the spatial audio, all this stuff with binaural head tracking and so forth. I find really exciting. I've got some research projects in the work there with some colleagues in sound recording, looking at different ways of binaural representations and how we can capture them and so forth. But like, yeah, no, phase is a complete, almost non-issue in binaural. Like for your own listening, like binaural beats are 100% a thing. But you've got a crazy complex mix with, you know, dialogue and soundtrack and effects and Foley and everything. You know, people aren't going to be saying, oh, like these two saw tones are, you know, a little bit out of phase. And there's lots of exciting things that you can do if you just throw everything out of phase. So, you know, a lot of drum and bass is written on that philosophy.
Education-wise, I think we know. I think we know where we're at with you, and you know, if you want to do a PhD, that option remains open, of course.
Oh, yes.
But after completing your studies, what do you want to do? Do you want to be an independent artist? Do you want to work in the studio realm? I think you have your hands in many places in terms of audio. So I'd be curious to know what would be an ideal position for you after education.
I mean, ideally, I can keep hands in many fires, or irons in many fires. Hopefully not hands in many fires.
I don't want that one.
that would be an issue. But I really enjoy working in a lot of different mediums. I find it helps keep me fresh in different mediums. You know, you're not just going through one thing all the time. And it's I enjoy keeping a mix of, like, you know, working on my own stuff, teaching other people how to do things, and also, you know, working with other people on their own projects. You know, being independent and like only doing your own stuff all the time obviously has its rewards. But at the same time, you know, I gain a lot of perspective from, you know, talking with people in dance, talking with people who are doing acoustic composition, classical stuff, working in theater, and, you know, just even, you know, all the stuff I'm doing with Matrolab, where you have somebody come into the space and you think, well, I never would have thought of, you know, looking at lighting design this way, or looking at, you know, using an 8-channel speaker system this way, or, you know, all these different things that then, you know, you take home with you and you want to start playing with yourself. And it's a constant feedback loop, and a really positive one at that.
How can I say this? Having your hands in having your irons in multiple fires. I don't know why hands are going in fires on this episode. Having your irons in multiple fires is such an important thing. I know that I would go crazy if I didn't, and I really do believe you hit on a very important point in that one. And you know, being someone that went to Concordia with you for 2 years, I always saw that you had so many different projects going on all the time. If it was collaborating with other students in the music department, or leading Clork, or presenting 7-channel compositions, this person probably is able to clone themselves in the background because there's so much going on here. Was how I felt. I'd be curious to know, doing all of these different projects and embarking in all of them, what are softwares that you use, whether it be for sound design or composition? What's your toolbar of softwares look like? What DAW, what everything? I'd be really curious to know if we could go down the list, and in detail, please. I really want to know your workflow, because I'm probably going to steal some. I'm letting you know right now.
I mean, it's nuts. Like,
yeah, I imagine.
My main workhorse for audio is Reaper, just because it handles like crazy huge multi-channel audio files really easily. I work a lot in Ambisonics, which is this crazy mathematical format they designed in the 70s out at Oxford, which you can sort of mix independent of your speakers. You basically have like a sound file that represents sound at a variety of angles that then you can feed to your computer to say, you know, make this a 5/1 piece, make this a 7/1 piece, make this for, you know, 22.2, that like box setup that is designed in Japan. All these different ways of presenting audio is super flexible. Also eats up your storage space like nobody's business. So I like to work with multiple computers. I have a a main storage server right now on TreeNAS, which is a version of Linux, which is like handling, doing all my file stuff behind the scenes, making sure that all my backups are up to date and all my computers are safe.
Right.
And then focusing, it's mostly like audio and Reaper. I still do some stuff in the Adobe suite. Adobe Audition is really nice for cutting audio. And I like the workflow of working with Premiere, After Effects as well, for visual effects. And also like you can program animations with audio in After Effects.
Actually?
If you start getting under the hood. Yeah. You can convert audio files to automation data. So you can like make an LFO in your audio and then just like bring it into After Effects and, have your way with
Well,
it.
you just kind of blew my mind a little.
I've been thinking of trying different. You see, this is why we have you on. Keep going.
Oh yeah. So like I'm working with that. Cecilia, which is a software design at University of Montreal, is Cecilia 5, which is the latest version, is really great for sound design. I do a lot of offline, like really heavy processing in there. I'm still using Max quite a bit by Cycling 74, which I use to like piece little controllers together, software to make stuff talk to each other. Controls some sound design. Max is a little iffy on the anti-aliasing side. I don't always like how the synthesis sounds, but for the most part, it gets stuff done. I just updated our Isotope Rx9 last week, which has been a royal trip. Advanced is really great for like using it what you're supposed to do in terms of like cleaning up audio and bulk processing lots and lots and lots of files. It's really great for that, but it's also like the machine learning and the algorithm is so robust that it's really fun to just screw with it and throw stuff that you're not supposed to. The new like focus on like denoise guitar can give you some crazy effects if you're throwing like seagulls into it, which is I'm working on for a project which will hopefully be in the winter. And I'm using sound particles a lot. It's like this crazy 3D animation software that you can use to move audio in 3D space. You do granular synthesis with like particle clouds that you can control how they move in 3-dimensional spaces. And like if you're working with your animator, you can get 3D models and make it so like the sound sounds like it's bouncing off the front of a shape or a house, or like pouring down liquids across stuff, and like really creative motion. But it's like crazy, like 100-hour renders that you can use your computer as a space heater in the meantime.
Oh my gosh.
No, it's like I think it's used a lot by Hollywood people, so like it's definitely when budget isn't a problem, you can definitely have some crazy computers thrown at it. In terms of like other stuff, I'm still using Native Instruments Reactor quite a bit. It just sounds really clean. It's really great for like doing digital synthesis. VCV Rack is fantastic. The community is getting increasingly weirder.
Oh really?
I won't go into details, but I like made the unfortunate mistake of opening Facebook earlier today, and like it was full of like people arguing over
oh boy,
what should be released, and who's in the moral right, and just like all this stuff over we should just make the software better and work together. But I mean we're arguing over sort of like nitty gritty of the underlying stuff.
Sounds like a lot of hands and fires over there.
Oh yeah, and no, 100%, and everybody's convinced they're right. As always.
Yeah, of course. It's
like,
the internet.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
But like I'm also doing a lot of stuff now on an iPad. Like VCV runs great on iOS. Moog has some like really crazy great synthesizers that sound really nice for iOS. And it's great for programming. I'm also using the T-Stick a lot just because I have access to it. And hopefully more people will have access to more of them as time goes on. I mean, you can find all the information if you want to build one on GitHub. Of course, that requires you have a 3D printer and these sorts of things. So fingers crossed we sort that one out. But
yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the T-Stick after, if you don't mind.
Yeah. But just like one last little trick that I've been doing a lot of audio is just like running DAWs inside of DAWs.
That's the Reaper thing. That's a Reaper thing right there.
Oh yeah, no, it's like Logic is great. I mean, I've been using Logic, since Logic Pro X came out, almost 10 years ago now. I remember Logic 9, sadly, but it's like Logic is really great, but I don't always love how it handles audio editing, and it tends to do the Apple thing of like doing a lot of things for you because it just kind of assumes what you want to do. Which Reaper is the opposite. It kind of does exactly what you want it to a fault, exactly what you tell it to do to a fault. Which
yeah,
can be
exactly.
a pain. But I also this is a blast from the past. I found my DVD copy of Intro to Reason 6.
Oh my gosh.
The other day.
Reason 6?
Yeah.
Reason 6, man.
Yep. So I've gone back and I found that stuff and I was like, hey, this is actually pretty useful. So I'm now also using a bit of Reason as well, just because some of the software, their hardware emulations just sound great. Default reverb definitely has a character that I like to it. And it's just kind of whatever's the fastest to get the job done. And it's so Reason 12 is so lightweight. You can run it as a VST, which then becomes, running it as a VST inside of Logic, that then you're busting all your audio from Logic into Reaper. It's this crazy DAW soup. And if we're lucky, then all that's being sent to Spat Revolution, or some sort of spatialization software to complete the comical chain of stacks of audio software piled on top of each other.
I just want to pause on a second there. Some people will stick with one DAW their entire life, I know some people who swear by Pro Tools and only Pro Tools every day,
Mm-hmm.
And over here
Casey
we got
just uses
Reason.
all of them in one.
Oh yeah.
Reason to Logic to Spaff.
Yeah.
That's that's insane. That's crazy signal flow.
Casey, what's your favorite DAW? Yes.
Yeah, all of them. I mean, sometimes you just got to open one audio file in Ableton because you decide that the time stretching in Ableton sounds better than the time stretching in Logic or whatever. And they all have their way of the way that they're designed. They lead to different results. So it's just great to try them all. And it's just crazy that my workflow from almost 15 years ago, all the stuff I did in high school, I can run on an iPad now. It's just crazy seeing how far that technology's come in such a short time span.
I guess the next question for me would be, what you mentioned before that you're working on something new. Well, you're always working on something new, but what's a personal audio project that you're working on or involved in?
So I did a long-term project with Gabriel Couillard over the pandemic.
Oh yes,
the drone streams.
Internacional?
Not that one. We also did that one.
Yes.
I've worked a lot with Gabrielle. She's absolutely fantastic to work with and a wonderful technician and a really exciting creative mind. Coming from a background in theater instead of audio. Again, it's really great perspectives to work on stuff together with. But me and her streamed for a year together doing live drones, and we after a year, it was kind of artistically where we kind of decided this is a good place to end it. But we came back and worked on some files over the summer that we've been sending back and forth that will hopefully be in a little package, maybe an album or an EP or something later in the year. And then, as always, I've got other stuff going. I'm writing some presets and some default synthesizers for the Raspberry Pi, the Guitar and Me project. I've got some dance stuff that's going to be coming out, as I mentioned, with Lucy Fondel, the Windy Days stuff, hopefully back next summer. And I'm also working with some colleagues at Concordia as well, working on some stuff that will hopefully be shown to the public in 2020 in the winter in a real space out in the visualization studio at Concordia, which I had a hand in helping develop the spatial audio system there, and I've been working on my thesis there. Luckily, I've been very lucky to have access to that space, and we'll be having some stuff on the big display wall there that will then hopefully be repackaged as a Oculus sort of VR 360 video experience, which I've been doing more of over the pandemic. I think the 360 video space it's almost there. we're still waiting on a few key things, but it's still really exciting technology. And I'm, excited to be at the forefront of some of
Absolutely.
that stuff
I wanted to ask you about, because I feel like when you finished Concordia, you never really left Concordia. You know what I mean?
No.
You're very involved in Concordia, and I believe you will be for a long time to come.
Hopefully.
A lot of people graduate from the electroacoustic program. They throw it on their resume, they throw it on their LinkedIn, and that's the end of it, right? I am one of those people, honestly. I hang around the mailing list, the Discord server. I try to be a little bit involved, but you are involved on steroids, and I really want to know how do you do that? Like how? Like I don't know. Like I just want to know how that came to be and how you maintain it. Really.
I mean, I was lucky in terms of I got really involved at Concordia, from the get-go, like from portfolio week, before coming into the program. I flew out from Newfoundland, and because of the logistics of flying from Newfoundland, you have to come for a whole lot of days, especially in the winter. So I was able to go to a bunch of classes and really fell in love with the program and got to know the professors. And then we already had that rapport coming in, and I just kept building on that. And then a friend of mine who's another one of these Concordia lifers, Peter Van Haften, mentioned to me that there was going to be a position opening at Matrolab. Friend Joe Brown, who also was a Concordia electroacoustic student, was leaving the position at Matrolab to go work at Moment Factory, which is this really crazy design group here in town. Work with some really high skill clients, and so I was able to sneak into that position at Matrolab. And then I was also lucky enough that I had done my independent studies, actually two independent studies, one before the spatial audio system was installed, and one while it was being installed. I finished all the composition stuff before the spatial audio system really got finalized, and then presented it the next term in the winter. And was able to, David Clark, who's the manager of the studio there, came to me and said, these spatial audio tools are really exciting. They bring such a level of immersion that you can't just get with a screen. But they're obtuse and they're weird, and we haven't really figured out how to interface with them. So he asked me to come on for a contract position. Because it's related to my thesis research and so forth, to help work with these tools and, do stuff that I'd already be doing, but, make sure that they're available to the Concordia crowd, and also work with stuff from the Concordia students as well. And I was also lucky, I mentioned Le Parc earlier, the Performing Arts Research Cluster. I was really lucky that before I graduated, we had these discussions with the research cluster that we could really advance what's going on, in terms of research, and the conversations that we're having at Concordia if we establish this position of an associate researcher. So these people who aren't necessarily at Concordia but continue to be involved in the research scene, if they're independent or if they're at another university or what have you. And so I've been able to stay at Le Parc as a associate researcher, discussing ongoing projects and meeting new students, and then of course as students come through the program, I'm meeting other people, and they're going on to do other things, and I'm able to continue to work with them. And I'm also just lucky with being able to have this balance of doing lots of projects, and also having availabilities in my schedule that just sometimes line up with stuff that's going on at Concordia. So sometimes LDAD will send out an email saying, hey, we need this many people for a laptop orchestra concert.
I saw that email. I was late. I was thinking about joining, but I saw it late. I would have been so down.
Yeah, I didn't see it. I'm not on the mailing list anymore.
You gotta subscribe
get back
to that
on.
thing.
Yeah.
I don't know how I got off. Anyways, sorry.
I mean, there's a lot of emails going on there, which is part of the thing. You have to be able to keep up with this constant avalanche of emails from all ends.
That's the thing.
I feel like I get 100 emails a day at this point. It's terrible. But you sift through all of it and pick the stuff that interests you. And I'm just lucky that that people at Concordia have enjoyed working with me and have enjoyed both the products that I bring to them, the deliverables, but also just, enjoy working with me as a person. So I'm able to keep coming back for things. And then, with Matrolab, it's this wonderful position of being able to stay in the Concordia research scene.
Yes, that's key, I think, to what you're doing. Honestly, that position is very key.
To some extent. But it's, I don't know if it's just that position or if it's, I think as always, it's a spectrum of, everything supporting each other.
True.
And, not being in the wonderful place where I don't have to say yes to everything that comes across my desk. I can say no to projects and, pick stuff that, maybe doesn't pay the best, but is of interest to me, while also still being able to, take positions that pay
I
well.
actually wanted to ask you about that. How much of the projects that you do are freelance based? Out of everything you do, compositions, drones, Concordia work, like everything.
A lot of it is freelance. It's a question of it's a really blurry line sometimes.
Okay, how so?
Just in terms of I might be officially working with somebody for something for, a technical support of loading them in and doing theater technician stuff, stuff from Matrolab that is very much that contract, that's pay sheet, that's the traditional Concordia stuff. But then, they come around and say, hey, we're going to be presenting this at a theater somewhere else, or we need help writing this max patch. We have this max patch from 2005 and it won't open anymore. Can you figure out why? And then it turns into freelance work. And so it's this cycle of both.
I
and
see.
A lot, more things are freelance than they are contract, just in terms of what I'm paid for. But there's still, a lot of contracts that are, they aren't contracts. They're, just research projects that I'm doing because I'm interested in them. And again, I have the flexibility and, in part also, because they fall into my master's thesis. So I can, just say that it's, research and I don't have to worry too much about getting paid for it because I have these other sources of income from elsewhere. And sometimes it's confusing in terms of just I write something for fun, and then I get a call and it's hey, do you have a piece? We're putting together a multi-channel concert. And it's I finished this just kind of to make myself happy. But it's here. So it becomes a freelance project. And that's always, exciting. And that's almost how things have been for a while. I felt like I was lucky a lot in Concordia that I'd do a project or do something on my own to procrastinate doing the stuff that was an actual pressing deadline. And then it turns into an assignment for something else or a freelance project or a concert.
Right.
These sorts of things.
I wanted to also ask you, because obviously all these things involve people contacting you contacting people. So how do you go about maintaining your network and your relationships? When you meet someone, do you have a business card on you? Do you slide them the good old website? How do you function with all of that?
I have been really, really lucky. Often it's just either I meet somebody in person and we get to talking and I can just give them my email or my phone number, or it's a personal friend who gets in contact with me about a project, or I've had a lot of projects of just you get an email and you're on the CC and it's hey, I can't take this project, but here are some people that I think are good. And I'm lucky that I have friends who recommend me for those sorts of things. Like the Matrolab position, that wasn't something I was looking for. That wasn't something I applied for. It was just kind of hey, Peter sent me an email and said, I know that Joe, you're looking to leave this position. I know Caci has background in, everything that you need to keep the theater running. Got to do some lighting stuff at my high school in the theater, as well as, live sound and all of that, which obviously I did more of at Concordia. So it was just the right set of people knew I had the skill set. People knew that I was around. And so, I was able to get into these positions, and now it's just continuing to, go through these, millions of emails that I get every day. And, thinning through the stuff that isn't necessarily
worth your time,
relevant to me. But it's also, trying to pay it forward as well, forwarding, saying, hey, I can't take this, but, I know there are people that can, and getting them into those positions, which, doesn't always work out, but, I'm not taking everything that comes in front of my email. So I'm not assuming
Yeah,
that
of course. So you
they're
pass it
going to be
forward.
taking everything.
You almost need like a personal assistant, you know, someone who can just do the emails for you, do the file backing up for you. Like, you know, that that should be maybe an investment in the years to come, Casey. That's my...
I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
Or at least some way to automate it.
Yeah, that would be more your thing. I'm just going to write a max patch that just swifts through my emails for me.
I mean, we're close. I mean,
of course you are.
Well, it's even like, I mean, that predictive text from Gmail, you know, like it can almost write your business emails
true.
for you at this point.
Yeah.
I
have used it a couple of times. I'm not gonna lie. With clients, once in a while, I get an email and I'm like, yes, have a, and then it's just like, oh, wonderful day. We could definitely complete that project for you. It just kind of just snaps it into place for me.
Yep.
So
the mix needs another day, week, month.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I haven't used that one yet, but I'm sure it's gonna come. It's gonna be typed in eventually.
Oh yeah. I mean, you know, the data collection that all these companies have is so robust. And I mean, like, it's one of those things of like, the more I learn about computers, the more it's a miracle that they work at all. Really? At the same time, you know, the machine learning stuff, I think because I've been able to study it so much, I like can see how these systems are working. And it's definitely, worrying at times on like how much data they have on you. But at the same time, you know, these are the costs of getting these services for free, which... I don't know. I don't necessarily want to wade into that philosophical debate right now.
No, I understand.
But it's great in terms of like what you can do with these systems from an automation standpoint, and also like musically, like the way that we teach computers to improvise. Still a little goopy, but you know, exciting trends.
Let's go back to
directions.
your MetroLab position. I really am interested in that as someone who pondered going into the theater world. I listened to a podcast a while ago, and for the first time ever on this audio podcast I was listening, so a podcast where audio people were being interviewed, pardon me, we had someone from the theater field, and then it clicked in my mind. Yes, the theater field is definitely a field with audio people involved. Can you like describe what you do as a theater technician, lighting, live audio, but like really get nitty gritty with it? What do you use? What's your 9 to 5 like? You know, like what's a typical day like? I really would love to know that.
Well, I mean, this is the beauty of, there's like what people normally associate with, you know, the theater technician stuff that you see more with a commercial theater, but we're lucky at MetroLab that because we're within a university, we are a research theater. Our space is pretty small. And you know, there's not a huge amount of space to put an audience, but it's still, you know, a space with a really nice dance floor. We've got an 8-channel sound system. We've got, you know, 6 sets of theater grade lights with the DMX mixing board and full-scale industrial dimmers that are suspended in the grid as well. And like we have an extra 25 pounds on that grid, you know, if people want to put stuff in there. We've got, you know, it's a black box theater space, but we also have, you know, room for projection screens, or I mean, with our last resident who I just finished loading out last Saturday, we worked on wrapping the whole theater in white paper and using it as a whole like white box projection space to like rebuild the sort of theater that they're going to go and perform. And so, you know, a normal like load in, you know, we send emails back and forth. Somebody applies to the theater and says, hey, I've got this project. You know, these are the dates that I'm available. And then we back and forth and say, you know, this is a Sandeep. Of course, our director has a say on, you know, what lines up with our research interests in terms of improvisation and dance and movement and music and video and all these things. And so from there, we email back and forth with the client once stuff is lined up. Jen, who's our like coordinator for working with the great Concordia bureaucracy, which can be a pain sometimes, especially in the last year with the pandemic. You know, what are we allowed to have? Who's allowed to be there, etc. But as we worked out these emails, we get all the tech specs and they show up. And I say, you know, here's the gear that we have. You know, here's your needs. We move lights to how they want to position stuff, how they're going to be using the theater. We set up the soundboard. You know, do they want to just have a stereo feed with like something that's easy, you know, an aux cord that they can just come and plug their phone into? Do they want to use, we've got some old Motu interfaces as well as some of the Army UFXs, these great multi-channel audio interfaces. If that's what people want to be using, do they want to have a small MIDI interface, Fader Fox or, Novation keyboard, what are their needs there? And then, telling them like what we can't provide, but what we can get within the university system. So it's the sort of stuff of, we can't get you a cinema grade camera, but if you go upstairs, there's this wonderful thing called the Center for Digital Arts, the CDA, where they can meet with you and get you, cameras and really crazy good projectors. We have some microphones, but you can always get more from the CDA. And like if you don't have a laptop, they can help with that. And so from there, then it's keeping in touch with the artists, making sure the space is working. The Concordia network hasn't gone into a weird ball and they can't access the Wi-Fi, which is more of a problem than it should be, really.
Oh, no way.
But it's all this stuff, especially now, people are still doing classes online and you get, 1,000 people in the university building who are like watching a hockey game and also trying to be in a Zoom call. And then you get like a confused call from an artist like, we all got kicked off the internet. We can't figure out why, like chasing down these little bugs and, working with the artists to make sure that their time is enjoyable and then, helping them get out of the space when that comes to the time. I mean, they mostly handle their own gear, but of course I can help with stuff there. And then it's when we don't have artists in residence, I'm still getting my hourly pay. So it's, trying to come in and make sure, how stuff labeled in the theater. Is the Velcro coming off the walls that is, keeping the curtains up? And does that need to be replaced? Just checking on stuff, all the little details that keep the space together and keep it clean. And then also working with Sandeep Bhagwati in some of his own stuff for other MatraLab performances. So like at UQAM, where Jaian did his master's, and I've had the luck of working with Gabrielle, who's studying there, and we have a lot of collaborators over there that, they have a yearly show called Nuit Blanche that they do at the end of February.
Oh, you're involved in that?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. So like
No way. Of course you are. That's amazing.
I get to do.
That's really cool.
All the diffusion for working with that. But it's also like, working with Sandeep and saying, like this is his interest for a piece this year. So work on the max patch for that, or, make sure the laptop gets there in the right time, and, working on, these other skills that I have from working in intermedia, stuff like OBS, or working with the video editor to, when we had a show at the Musée d'Art Contemporain, the MAC, here downtown, I got to do some audio mixing, both for video and also some standalone audio pieces that were going to be presented in the gallery and then ultimately ended up on the website because it was the pandemic. So sadly, we couldn't have
I want to
an
talk
audience
to you
come in.
also about, I know that obviously you do lighting. I recently started working in lighting at my job on top of doing location audio, and I'm quickly noticing the similarities between lighting and sound, where you can diffuse light, you can reflect light, light can be absorbed. It really plays such an important role in everything that is visual. How was it for you to do a transition from audio to lighting? Because for me, I was a bit scared at first, but now it's making more sense. What was the jump from those two paths like for you?
I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. They're pretty similar. I was lucky. Like I said, my high school had a really great theater, the Holy Heart Theater, which was this wonderful combination of an incredibly high-tech theater with no house technician. So I got to cut my teeth pretty early in terms of just like working with a close friend of mine, Lyden Thorpe, who's now a professional AV technician out in Brooklyn and New York. And so, I sort of early on got to figure out, the signal routing stuff, working with the DMX mixer, it's all pretty similar. And then when I got to taking my video class in the intermedia program at Concordia, we did lighting. And I was lucky to be able to have that experience and like learn kind of officially, like this is how they do stuff in the filming world, and then it's just like taking all these bits and pieces and making the transition into theater, and it's making sure that as long as it works for the performance and looks good. I mean, that's most of the concern. And like you said, it's all pretty similar stuff. And I remember having a talk with Eldad Sabari during one of my independent studies, where I was talking about it's if you keep an open mind and when you're working with media stuff and like to start to understand how some of this stuff works, you'll notice a lot of similarities. Like a green screen is, it's a threshold with, it's either a color or, it's a light value or something, which like if you learn how to work in Audio Gate, you already know how a threshold works. So it's just kind of thinking like, okay, this is a threshold effect, but it's on a video. And so, all these ideas sort of cross-pollinate, and you just sort of think of, timing and control for lighting is, not too similar to, you have to bring your levels up and down and you have your cue points and all of this. And, it's also working with theater stuff. If you're an audio technician, you're working in QLab. And if you're a lighting technician, you're working in QLab. So there's just a lot of similarities in terms of the software there. And it's across everything as well. I'm sure as Anthony can attest to, a VJing piece of software and a DJing piece of software aren't too similar. One plays audio clips and one plays video clips.
That's exactly it.
So once you, this is the thing. It's like developing a skill set through actually understanding what you're doing, which I think Concordia like mostly does well. I think it kind of sometimes falls on its face a little bit there, but they still give us the freedom that we can learn some of that stuff on our own. But if you like understand sort of the broad strokes of what you're doing, and enough that you can take it from one thing to the other, as opposed to like I set this mixer to this things and that's how it works and that's how my life goes, which I think can be how some people learn audio, and then it's a real shock when they come to video or lighting because they've learned the fundamentals of setting a mixing board for a certain level, but they haven't learned why you do that and like how to change it for a show or what have you. That if you actually dig into the technique and the fundamentals, it can really blossom into other mediums quite easily.
Earlier, you mentioned the T-Stick, and I see that you collaborated in a composition called SOS.
Yes.
For this year's edition of Festival Internacional de la Imagen in May, and also again in September to ARS Electronica. Can you talk a little bit about the piece? What did you contribute, and how does your contribution interact with the other artists' work?
So I was incredibly lucky that while I was doing my degree at Concordia, I was able to go to Colombia during the summer to do a field school over there, and also present at La Festival de l'Image in 2019. And I was able to build some connections with Tata Ceballos, who was one of the other collaborators on this project, as well as Gabriel Couillard, who was here in town, as well as
Andres.
I met Andres as well down there, as well as Camila Campos Quintana and Christian Felipe Lisraldes, who provided the visuals for SOS.
Okay.
And again, they enjoyed working with me. I enjoyed working with them. We connected through WhatsApp and stayed in touch. And I presented at Festival de la Image in 2020 because I had continued to work telematically with Tata, which Tata's research has been in telematic performance. So this wonderful ability that we have over the internet to make music with our friends, no matter where they are in the world. And so we were able to keep writing. And then when it came around to Festival de la Image this year, me and Gabrielle were invited to work again with Tata. And the week that we started writing and we had our first digital meeting, as it was the pandemic, the protest started in Colombia.
Right.
Which
I remember that.
Yeah.
I was in Colombia shortly after that, actually.
So I mean, as Anthony can attest to, the political climate building up to it in Colombia was, at a boiling point. There was a lot of dissatisfaction with the government, with the handling of the pandemic, the the refugee crisis, as well as just generally corruption and these sorts of things. And it escalated into the protests. Our visual artists were working in Cali, and were able to capture video of the protests. And we just kind of had a meeting, and we said it would be irresponsible really to write about anything other than the protests. We felt
Right, to not talk about it.
yeah, no, exactly. And we were lucky enough that we can present at a pretty high profile academic festival at a conference and still be able to talk about politics in our work. Fresh and pretty raw politics. So Tata was there in Manizales, and our visual artists were working in Cali, and they were able to collect all this video material, as well as Tata recorded all these wonderful voice recordings of some political sayings, all the protest sayings that were getting popular on social media, as well as he recorded the names of the 30 victims at the time that had been killed by the police throughout the protests, just through the initial months that we spent writing the piece. And, definitely all of the political unrest definitely fed the piece, both, and all the information that we're putting into the piece, but also, the military crackdowns in Cali. It's hard to have a rehearsal when the government shuts off the internet. So we were, working, around the clock basically as much as we could to get timings that worked for everybody, and
Right.
when stuff would fall apart,
the internet
just move it.
wasn't completely shut down because
At times it was, from my understanding, or at least regionally. But Cali had close to several thousand military members. From what I remember, the Colombian government sort of falsely claimed that all these protesters were involved with the FARC, whereas they were students and people who were just generally fed up with how things had been going in Colombia. And so we had this initial very raw creation of the piece that we looked at. SOS was the hashtag SOS Colombia was the hashtag that sort of swept across social media. And Tata had pointed out that the SOS both has this sort of musical motif from Morse code, the short, long, long, short, but it's also it's a rondo format. It has a ABA setting. So we took all this and wrote an audio piece, recorded our live performances. I was working with the T-Stick and the processing all of this voice, doing a lot of really interesting parallel processing and feedback, and playing this SOS motif that we played between the musicians here, me and Gabrielle, and then our musicians in Colombia, to create this initial version of the piece. And then Ars Electronica had a call for works in the summer, and crisis and emergency was one of the topics they were focused on. So me and Gabrielle saw this call and said the piece would probably be a good fit for the festival, and it's a good political message to get in front of more people. So we talked with Tata and the team down there, and got their clearance to send it in, and we were really lucky. The executive team, which was in part headed by one of our professors at Concordia, Dr. Ricardo Del Fara, wrote back to us and said, we want you not only to be a short presentation of this piece, but we want it to be part of the Balance Unbalanced panel, talking about the political climate, both in Colombia, but also throughout the world in terms of climate change and broader political trends. And so we met together and felt that the video was really quite strong and could basically stay as is. But we wanted to work with the audio and kind of explore this feeling that we had of the Canadian media coverage and the international media coverage of Colombia when the protests first started. It was everywhere, and very quickly it faded from the international media scene. But the protests continued throughout the summer, and stuff continues to be very much in flux. The vaccination rollout has not been handled well in Colombia, and it was all this frustration that we had about people not paying attention to what we felt was a very important political issue. And so we felt that we could revisit the audio, the three of us, me and Gabriel and Tata, and create this new version for ours, accompanied with the introduction that we recorded together. So that was how that came to be.
Wow. That's incredibly rich. And
you
very
lived so many enriching experiences. I don't know what to say, honestly. It's crazy how music can transcend into so many domains. And
no, music has always been part of politics, and it's very interesting to see and fun to see electroacoustics in politics.
Be involved.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's it's fantastic, and this is why we do this podcast, because we want to, obviously we want to talk about audio and technical things. We have a technical audience, but these are conversations that need to be had, and things that we shouldn't shy away from discussing. So I personally just want to thank you for sharing that, Kasey. That's I think the impact you had helped a lot of people out there. I think that's the best way I can put it.
Thank you.
Of course.
And I mean, thank you for asking about it as well. It's good that we don't hide these pieces.
We have to be very it has to be open. I think you said the word pieces, and I kind of want to transition to that. I think you have many compositions that I listened to before recording, and I don't even know which one to start with, because they're all so different, and they're all so unique in their own way. I think if I had to choose one to start with, the first one I listened to was Metro.
I think I remember hearing that one in class.
Right away when I read the description on Bandcamp, I'm like, this is a 205 or 305 project for sure. Yeah, that's a deep cut reference. Unless you did the electroacoustic program at the Concordia, you do not know what I just said. That 205 and 305 are electroacoustic 1 and electroacoustic 2. They're basically like the nucleus of the electroacoustic courses you take at Concordia. Do you want to kind of go into detail with Metro, and feel free to bleed into the other compositions? Let's really get into like the music that you create.
Yeah. So Metro, you hit it right on the head. It was 205, my final project. So like starting in Electroacoustics 1, they start to let you into some of the soundscape stuff. And soundscape recording is really, really special to me. I really enjoyed sound effects and, Foley and these creation of spaces as a kid in film, and EA and multi-channel audio is so exciting for that. And so I wanted to, start working with that. And Metro was really the first like multi-channel soundscape piece I got to work with. And it was also, I was really interested in, we have this wonderful Dope A100 system at Concordia.
Yes, I missed that thing.
Which,
yeah, I do.
I feel bad for it in the pandemic. Those kids who are starting out,
yeah,
got to play with it yet.
Oh man, I didn't even think about that. That's crazy. Oh, that sucks. I couldn't do it. I would have to break into that studio and just use it.
Yeah. I mean, I feel bad for that synthesizer. It's so lonely. So I got to start playing with some of the stuff that I had done for my portfolio. So like the pieces that you write when you're applying to get into Concordia. I started playing around in Reactor with this way that you can use a vocoder, which is, traditionally like a filter bank that you control with your voice, and you use synthesizer sounds for it. I thought, this could be a fun way to process soundscape recordings and start playing with adding texture to field recordings. So that was something that I had wanted to play with. And so it was like these starting ideas that then I took into Amadeus. I was still cutting everything by hand for this piece, which like it's a wonderful like blessing and a curse of Metro. I would I talk a bit about, how Concordia sometimes you can not really learn exactly how stuff works, or you get maybe rewarded for doing things the hard way when you shouldn't be doing stuff the hard way. So like in Metro, I'd like individually apply a delay like 300 times, like changing the delay time a little bit every time, because I like wanted to have like really specific sorts of sounds that honestly, you can just do with a reverb plugin. But it was all this like little sorts of interest in detail, and I really wanted to, get all the little details of the Metro. Kevin Austin, our professor for that course, gave me the feedback that a lot of the sort of traditional electroacoustic EA pieces looking at the Metro are really clean. They have the sorts of things that you associate with the Metro that has, the sounds of the trains, the tones that you hear when the doors are closing and opening, and the announcements and these sorts of things. But my experience as, somebody from Newfoundland, where, yes, I had been on, public transit. I was really lucky as a kid. I had a really privileged upbringing. I got to travel a lot. So it wasn't completely foreign to me, but, being somebody who had lived in, a relatively small, quiet province and moving to Montreal and, getting to experience the Metro, which is loud and it's got all these different sounds and all these different people, and all the stations are these really weird shapes that have these like really different acoustic characteristics. And so I just wanted to, capture all these different little things and, kind of weave a little narrative out of that. Kevin has said, it's sort of a more cinematic view to things, which I really enjoyed getting to explore. And I think Metro, still comes across with some of that. It thinks very highly of trains, which I I don't know if I would have the same approach now. But there's still a lot there that is, I really like. And then, that piece was my last piece I wrote in 205. And then I, went basically right back into it in 305. Binary was the first piece I wrote in 305, which I've been very lucky with. It's had very long legs, and people keep contacting me. It's had some radio play in Ontario, and I got asked to be programmed at Nuit Blanche back in Nuit Blanche 2020, the last Nuit Blanche before the pandemic. Thank you. Where the assignment that Jaian and Anthony will be familiar with is that you want to write an abstract piece or a political piece using the voice.
Oh my gosh, yes,
and the synthesizer.
Yes.
And maybe the Primordium, which is this crazy instrument built by this instrument builder, Tom Nunn, who I draw a lot of inspiration from. I discovered his stuff through Concordia, and you can find some really crazy contraptions he's built up on YouTube. But I kind of found it funny in the presentation of the assignment that I was like, you can be abstract or political. And it's like you're working with the synthesizer or the voice. And I kind of felt, as a non-binary person, I wanted to do sort of this blurring between all of them. I wanted to do like an abstract political piece about binaries, and about, how there isn't really binaries, nothing's really black and white. There's all this gray space. And so I wanted to play with, can I make this piece that is like very sort of presents in like you have a part that's focused on the voice and a part that's focused on the synthesizer and like has some Primordium elements in it as well. But, the whole time it's this 5-channel experience that has both the voice and synthesizer in all of it. And there's no real, separation between the two. And it, confronts this sort of lack of binaries while still being abstract and, paying homage to a lot of the really early EA stuff. Because again, I cut this one all by hand. This was the last piece I did in Amadeus, which certainly was a decision. I can't believe I continued to work exclusively in Amadeus that long. But it's a great piece of software, but and it brings you to some really great understandings of like how audio works at like a waveform level. But the conveniences of a modern DAW cannot be understated.
Absolutely.
No.
And so I made the jump into, I was then cutting just in Adobe Audition, and I wanted to do another soundscape piece that explored this stuff from my dad's side of the family is from northeastern Pennsylvania, the NEPA region. And there's been a huge push throughout the 2000s and the 2010s. This was all traditionally in terms of the American colonial set, it's coal mining country. And through the years of coal mining, the environment has become super volatile. The land is collapsing because there's all sorts of like abandoned empty mines underneath these towns. And, as we've moved away from coal, there's been this move towards oil and fracking. And fracking has had this huge impact on the acoustic environment of, this place that I spent so much of my childhood as I was back and forth between Canada and the UK and where my family was in the States. And so I wanted to get some field recordings of how it was and sort of like represent, this change from mostly focused on acoustic spaces to then these synthesized spaces, human interaction, and then also just all this machine sound that you get with fracking. It's the oil wells, venting gases. It's all these trucks that weren't in these small communities before that are carrying, all sorts of pollutants and heavy oil and heavy water and, all this stuff that, seeps in and, deeply infects the environment. How can I represent this in an acoustic way? And I mean, I get most of the way there. I think the crickets are a little loud. That's my thoughts on Into the Brush. Compositionally, it gets the way there, but oh man, those crickets are loud. I remember the first time I presented that in class, and Kevin Austin did this little stand-up routine of coming up to the front of the class and pretending to shake the crickets out of all of his clothes, just because they're so
Kevin
present.
Thing to do.
Oh yeah.
I miss that guy.
No, he's fantastic.
Yeah, good. Yeah. He is
absolutely.
fantastic.
I remember walking into class once and seeing him lying down on the floor and just screaming because he was just showing us how acoustics worked. He was just lying down in the corner. And he was just making noises.
Yep.
Yeah. Sounds like
And
Kevin. Sounds like Kevin.
Yep. Yeah, no. And like those like early classes when it's like, he pretends to be frustrated with you and goes over and would scream he'd open up the upright piano and scream into it and go back to teaching. And like the first couple times you do it, you're like, what is this madman doing? Like, this is completely absurd. And then you get to the acoustics chapter of the course and he does it again. And you're like, my God, this man is a genius. He's been teaching us this whole time.
The whole time. I know.
Which is like every interaction with Kevin. I keep having these moments. It's like 5 years on, 6 years on from studying with him. You're like the first time you encounter it, you're like, this isn't right. Like I don't think this is very odd. And then you just have a passing thought, and you're like, damn it, he's right.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. I've had that literal moment so many times at Concordia.
Oh yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. This is some good nostalgia right now. I'm really glad for real. Let's go back to the third composition that I wanted to talk about called Into the Brush.
Mm-hmm.
So when I listened to this one, I once again was blown away. I'm sure this one must have had some sort of like radio play as well. Like of course
it got a little bit.
Yeah, please tell me about it.
Yeah, I mean, that was lucky enough that got Ralph Hopper picked that one up for radio play at a college radio station in Ontario, and I believe it's also been featured here in town as well as in another radio station in Toronto.
Okay, great.
Another sort of experimental leaning place. But yeah, Into the Brush is like that piece has a lot of starts for some of the stuff that you see throughout my composition. That was like the first piece I did with a hydrophone, which for those who don't know what a hydrophone is, it's a piezo microphone that you can put underwater, and the sounds that are transmitted through the water get transferred into the microphone. And so you get this like crazy shift of perspective. I was playing around with like these underwater sounds that I have gone on to explore more into. Hydrophone's just great, and they're super cheap. And this was kind of the start of my understanding of hydrophones being cheap. I wrote that piece and started telling people about the hydrophones. And sure enough, one of the hydrophones at Concordia got broken, which ended up being the like set of dominoes that fell into me, finally actually buying one.
Oh, okay, I see.
But which has then meant it's gone into I use the hydrophone quite a bit in feedback cycles, which was then one of the pieces I wrote for 406, which is the advanced composition course.
I think I was in your class for that one.
Yeah.
I think I was in. Yeah, I was. Yeah,
with Michael.
Yeah, with Michael. Yeah.
Yep. Which that was a great experience of writing feedback cycles. It was one of my first tackles into like trying to write a really sort of big piece. With those early electroacoustic composition classes, you have to write a lot more pieces throughout the term, which is great because it gets you into other things. But once you get into those advanced classes, you can like focus into what you want to be doing. And so, I got to take that term to just like really dig into feedback cycles, working with feedback. And so around the time I had written Into the Brush, that's the start in 305, or sort of like a curve to the class where Kevin gets increasingly less hands-on and kind of like lets you do your thing and find yourself. And I was spending more and more time up at McGill. I was lucky in my first year, after I had finished the first term, I got this stray email from Kevin. He was saying, your electroacoustic works remind me a lot of Trevor Wishart, who's this famous electroacoustic composer from Britain. And he sent me some links to some pieces and said, listen to these over the summer, just to get your ears open to some sounds and get you thinking for writing your pieces for 305. And then, as Kevin is getting less hands-on for 305, our colleagues at McGill, at Kermit, which I'm now have the pleasure of being more hands-on involved with, but the Center for Interdisciplinary Research in Music and Media Technologies at McGill invited Trevor Wishart for a keynote lecture. And so I thought to myself, hey, this is a great chance. Trevor's giving a talk for free. I might as well go to it. There's this concert and he's giving this other talk. And I went to these things and, that was my introduction to Kermit. And I was like, wow, this is a really great resource. There's all these, incredibly high profile talks from all these like really talented artists and, not just artists, it's, software engineers and, psychologists and, all these different people. And so I started attending these lectures more and more. And then, that really fed into sort of how I was doing stuff for feedback cycles and my independent studies at La Parc and the stuff I was working on with Eldad and the laptop orchestra. And then, from there, I got to working on some piano pieces later on, focusing a bit more on live stuff. And then, I don't know, should I keep giving a blow by blow of all these pieces?
Yeah, you're doing great. Yeah. This is like super interesting stuff. Thank you. Keep going, please. We're audio nerds, so all of the nerdity is accepted.
Wonderful. Yes. So this was also like feedback cycles was really fed by was fed by getting to go into Kermit, but it was also Eastern Bloc, which is this wonderful resource here in town. Alain Lefebvre, who's this incredibly talented noise musician, they were giving a workshop at Eastern Bloc, and so I was able to go there and get some of those ideas started. And the wonderfulness of Concordia is that you have 24/7 access to the studios while you're a student. As long as somebody else hasn't booked the studio first, you can grab it. So I was running around from like three to four universities a week, trying to get to all these lectures and then doing these like crazy long studio sessions at these really weird hours and, starting to go to more shows and seeing what was happening in the city and then trying to, cram this all into a piece.
Kasey, I just want to pause you for 1 second on what you said. I think there's something super important to say. If you're listening to this podcast right now and you're at Concordia or you're starting a college degree in audio or anything of the sort, what Kasey just said is what you do. That is the winning formula. Like, listen to what is being said.
Absolutely.
Like, weird hours at the studio, going to different places, meeting new people, making connections. Like, I really want to stretch that point. I think you hit on like something that's like so vital to success after graduation, because all of those efforts that you did like propulsed you in this. Like, and I will say that no one's in your lane. Like you have gone to a level of success where like you are doing so many amazing projects, and this is all because you worked super hard while you were at Concordia and when you're at McGill right now, because all these things are things that you are passionate about and you keep pushing forward. So I just really want to stretch that point, Kasey. Please carry on.
Thank you. And I, getting to feedback cycles, that success also came from collaborating with a lot of really smart people. I had met some of my fellow music students, as you do through some of the recording projects that you do. You have to meet other people in the music department who aren't necessarily EA students because you need people to record. And I met Nusha Taharian, who's this wonderful pianist composer who's now pursuing her master's degree at Columbia College in Chicago for film scoring. But at the time, we were talking a lot about gender representation and these issues in electroacoustics. It skews super male, and so we had wanted to build a conference that would give students places to present these works and talk about stuff. So in the meantime, we started planning the Women in Music Conference, which happened that December, and I got to premiere Feedback Cycles.
At that, I was there. I remember that. That was such a great day.
Oh yeah,
it was so fun to be around people like that. Yeah.
It was such a fantastic day. Like so many great works presented from so many different backgrounds.
What about? Sorry. If you keep going on that point, because wasn't there another piece that was inspired or like
yes.
that you did? Yeah.
So like Feedback Cycles came from. I felt that all these systems could be modeled in feedback, and so I started also exploring feedback in the synthesis realm and some interests I had in data bending, which is where you specifically use software incorrectly to get it to do these sort of fringe, weird edge cases. And so I was playing around with these sorts of things and writing all the software. And while I was talking with Nusha, I had Feedback Cycles as my like solo work, but Nusha was coming together with this graphic score and was saying, I'd love for there to be an EA part, and I have some ideas. And so I was already really interested in graphic scoring. I was doing an independent study with Eldad, and I contacted him and said, hey, I've been asked to work on this piece. Can I write about it for my independent study? And so I got the chance to work with Nusha and work on Longings and that bringing that piece to light, and then all these conversations that we've been having and all these ideas came to wanting to write an improvisational piece for focusing on piano and process piano, which then was what I ended up working on in the winter. It was this interesting idea. I was always interested in distance and both from like a miking perspective and also this like philosophical idea. Nusha was going away for an exchange. There's also a pianist who I've been working with since the early days. We met in junior high, Simon Henley, who's now working a master's degree at Leeds Beckett College in England and is also doing big things for Monster Cat, working behind the scenes there to make the EDM machine in Canada keep moving.
Yes.
But he was located in London, in Ontario. And so I wanted to explore, distance, piano improvisation via distance. And so me and Simon and Nusha were talking, and I initially got some recordings that I did myself in Oscar Peterson Hall, this wonderful concert hall that you can use for free in your degree at Concordia, which is just this like incredible space that is underused, I think, by the students. But I got to do some work there. I got some recordings from Simon. Sadly, the recordings from Nusha didn't work out for that year, but I was able to then follow it up at the end of 2020 for a piece I got to premiere at Nuit Blanche this year, which then had some legs and worked at some other conferences throughout the spring. But I was really interested in getting really deep into like processing piano, focusing just on one instrument. But like how to bring these sort of environmental textures, playing with recordings of ice and all these wonderful sounds that you get in Montreal. I've been previously interested in that stuff with my live electronic piece I did with Glennie back in 305, Writer's Block, which was this crazy multimedia piece about it being cold in Montreal. It was a winter's tale. Our group was called Writer's Block. It was called Writer's Block because we both used tablet controllers.
Nice.
I like that.
Which that was the thing, was I like had started in a max class in my second year as designing these live performance instruments, which then I was working more and more on for my fixed EA pieces and also with the laptop orchestra, which then I was lucky enough, throughout my third year, I had already kind of decided that, music technology was a place that I wanted to be in at McGill. And I really, really liked Dr. Marcelo Wanderley's research. I kept finding his name when I was doing research for stuff in EA. And I was like, hey, this guy's here. He's involved with Kermit. I should meet with him. And I did, and was lucky. He was able to give me some guidance. Quebec has this system called the inter-university transfer, where you can take credits. You can take one class at another university if it's in the same city as you. So I was able to branch out and, start studying some of the undergraduate music technology courses at McGill that I was told, if I don't take them now, I'll have to take them in the master's degree. So like, you can take them as electives. Why don't you take them? And so, I was taking these sort of like technical learnings that I was getting there and, starting to feed my EA compositions my fourth year and all this live stuff, working with Andrea Young, my independent study for Spaces Within, which was this exploration I got to do for a fixed EA piece, mixing spatial 3D audio in real time and working with video and data bending and field recordings from, that was the year the climate, the first climate march, the big one happened. And I was, wanting to explore these sorts of acoustic spaces, but also, how do we look at, acoustic spaces from, the really big sort of traditional spaces to like what you can get out of, amplified microphone space. There's one movement in that piece that's all just recordings of bubbles in a soda glass. I was playing around with, I have a soda stream, and it's just like, how much carbonation can I put? Putting microphones really close in the hydrophone and getting these textures to then process. And then also playing around with a induction coil microphone, which is basically just a magnet on a string, with an audio jack that comes out of it. And you can get these like really interesting textured recordings that have these wonderful organic feel to them, but are super artificial because they're the radiation coming off of your devices. And of course, they're not audio signals. They're, these crazy multi-spectrum waves. And so if your sampling rate is super high, you can get crazy stuff once you start slowing them down. So, like when you're at the climate march and the cops are there and they've got some weird encryption that, puts out this like rhythmic tone at 48 kilohertz. But if you're recording high enough, you can get it, and then you slow it down and you can build these rhythms and cool. All these sorts of things.
That's so creative. Yeah, that's really, really creative.
Oh, thank you. But it's just like, just like trying to think of acoustic spaces in all these different ways. And I had these wonderful field recordings from Columbia and from the mountain in Montreal. And like, can I create this hybrid soundscape space that is kind of both, but it's neither? And like, and also I wanted to explore a 3D sound. Like, what can you subvert with the audience experience? If you have this like traditional soundscapey space, but all the birds are in the floor, or you're hearing water coming from above you, like drips out of the ceiling. What does that invoke? And some of that stuff, like came together at the very end. It was like a super long process of getting everything together for that. And so some of it, I didn't have as much time to spend on it to like really polish it as much as some of the other stuff, but it gave me some really, really great ideas that then, I was able to just focus in making live music for a while. The thing is like, I had thought I was going to take some time back from not performing. I did a show like every week, and then for most of the beginning of 2020, and then the pandemic hit. And then, I was involved with Clark, the laptop orchestra. Andrea, I was already involved as I was taking the class for credit, but I was basically, TAing the class and helping people get their ideas off the ground. And I met Michael Palumbo, who's another electroacoustic graduate who's really focused in telematic music. And we had asked him to be a guest for the laptop orchestra. And he had just started this concert series the month before the pandemic called Exit Points, which was at a restaurant in Toronto. And he had said, had thought, this would be really, really great if we could move this concert online and give people a place to express themselves, in real time throughout the pandemic. And so I got involved there and got involved in coordinating and helping people out. And, we're still doing a concert every month. We've got another one. It's the last Wednesday of every month. We'll be doing another one this week. And hopefully there'll be even more once this podcast is available to you all.
Yes.
And, I was doing stuff with the live drone and just focusing on the live stuff, and then got to really dig into the research end of things for my thesis, and just like see what's available in terms of tech, and like write some papers on that. And then the Christmas break came, and I started watching some movies and watching some TV, and things started sparking my interest. And between the tech and all that stuff, I was thinking take some time off, and then next thing I know, I'm writing another piano piece. And I contact Nusha and give her some improv ideas and send some stuff I had already recorded pre-pandemic and stuff I had done with Simon, and said, I want to expand on this. And she sent me back some really beautiful improvisations that then I was able to take and spatialize and process and write a whole new piece entirely from home, working from, mixing multi-channel, always in another studio, to like, can I do this all at home from headphones? And sure enough, it worked out. And that brings us up to the pieces now, though I've certainly left some things by the wayside. All the laptop orchestra pieces that I had a chance to perform, and I was involved with the synthetic. I wrote a piece called Synthetic Ice Scapes, which is a piece for T-Stick, which was for a research project at McGill as part of Kermit, for different ways of writing for the T-Stick. I wanted to write for laptop orchestra and T-Stick, which had been done in the very early days of the T-Stick with the original composer coder sort of duo, Joseph Malik, who's now teaching at Dalhousie University in Halifax in the computer science department, and D. Andrew Stewart, who's teaching composition at the University of Lethbridge in Alberta. And I was working with gestural instruments and that stuff there, which was my first exploration into LibMapper, which is this wonderful tool that we develop at McGill for connecting devices and making it easier and faster to just get stuff connected and up and running and getting ideas flowing, that then I was able to take and bring into the piano stuff once the pandemic happened. But I kept working with the T-Stick and doing improvisations with exit points and, keeping all this stuff flowing. And with exit points, we, went in a bunch of different directions for playing with all these different ways that we can do stuff remotely, the traditional concert stuff that we were doing, and then, the concert every week where, people from the audience, quote unquote, as much of the audience as you have in the digital space, can, join our Zoom call at the end of the night and do improvisations with us to join in the music making. And then, we played around with live scoring video games, having people play games and making music for it.
As they're gaming?
Yeah.
Wow.
I was
like, as they're playing in real time, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
that's so cool.
Yeah, we got to do some stuff with Jeff Tremblett, who's a fellow Concordia alumni from the composition program, who was is also a Twitch partner over at And Justice for Joof, JOOF. And so we got to work on, composing stuff in real time to the games he was playing. And then me and Gabrielle were playing around with some of our own games and doing different ways of doing concerts and the drone streams and all these things. And, as well, doing the research stuff and, studying. McGill has a pretty intensive entrance exam when you start the MA.
I can only imagine.
I was lucky. I got the pandemic. So, there was, barely a better excuse to just sit at home and read, and really educate myself
that's true.
On
that is very true.
Everything that I could. Their reading list covers everything from acoustics and building instruments to software and computer science and how we store data and these sorts of things. And really wrapping my head around the electrical engineering, computer science stuff. And, it's incredible as well. Both what I could get out of all this stuff in, from books, but also what I could get, just off of YouTube. MIT has taught a bunch of their courses at distance for so long on YouTube. And so, you can just go online and, take a graduate seminar in algorithms if you want to. I mean, you have to, kick your own ass to do all the homework yourself. But if you want to and you're interested and you've got the time and, the flexibility to do so, you can teach yourself to code and all these sorts of things pretty easily. So I was lucky that, the pandemic presented me with a chance to have all this time to study all these topics. And then the McGill exams gave me this hard set deadline that I, had to know all this stuff to be able to, have a day where they send you this super intensive PDF that, you have to answer, all these crazy things of how does a saxophone work? How does audio get encoded, and why does Nyquist do the things it does? And, how do you effectively compress a MIDI file, and just all these different technical things that I had taught myself. And, also learned at Concordia as well to some extent. And I was lucky. I did well in the exams. And so I didn't have to take a lot of prerequisite classes. I could just go straight into the graduate studies and just do the graduate seminars. But then that also meant I had a little bit of extra time to work with some dancers in the summer and, keep doing the drone streams and, write some stuff for Thesis.
Right, and work on other projects. I do want to comment on something you just said. And you've been saying a lot. I think you say, I was lucky.
Mm-hmm.
But wasn't it more that the right opportunity came and you were always very prepared? Isn't that what it is more? I feel like it is, because yes, you did get lucky in a sense, but I feel like you don't get lucky all the time because you get lucky all the time. You get lucky all the time because you're prepared for all these things.
You got to jump on the projects and
exactly.
I mean, definitely to some extent. I do agree that it hasn't been complete cosmic coincidence of
exactly
everything that I've done. But I was, it's a culmination of the fact that, I was born.
It's momentum.
I was born into a family that, we could afford music lessons when I got interested in it. And, we had the time. It was this weird combination of, my mother working in writing about the arts. So I went to a lot of stuff as a kid, and, she just didn't think to say no, if I was I want to, see this concert or go to this gallery thing.
Right. I'm sure having artistic parents have a huge impact on that.
Yeah. And it was also just time and place. My dad was teaching every other year. The university in Newfoundland has a separate campus in England, and my dad would teach a course there every other year. And just how things happened to be, I was studying music and could be traveling back and forth from London to Cambridge to, all these different places to study music. But it was also, dubstep was getting big at the time. And, I was able to get access to stuff through BBC, and I was able to go to, one of the first proms where they had a DJ live with the orchestra. And I was like, oh, you can, combine these sorts of stuff. And it set all the wheels in motion for then, when I got into EA, I had, almost, I had been working in digital audio since elementary school. And, had been...
You were way ahead of the curve.
Taking it seriously in high school and junior high. But, so I had taken music theory classes when I was in elementary school and in junior high. So I just already had, a lot of the background that, my colleagues didn't necessarily have. So I wasn't, learning from the ground up as much as other people. And I was really lucky that, my parents were able to give me a lot of support, throughout the electroacoustic degree. So I was able to, really focus on, getting all my assignments done. And I had, the flexibility in my schedule to be able to, book 12 hours in a row in a studio and just work, and be able to go to concerts and, be able to make connections and take stuff, not necessarily based on how much it was paying, but, did it interest me? Was it relevant to what I was doing? All the sorts of stuff.
Absolutely.
So, not everybody gets to start with a Mac computer and, parents who are totally fine with you spending hours on GarageBand as a small
Absolutely.
child.
Yeah.
I think we covered so much.
Oh, yeah.
I still have more questions. We're definitely not ending this anytime soon, in my opinion. Did we talk about Fille Harmonique?
No.
I don't think we have.
Let's
get into
touched on
that.
Fille Harmonique.
No.
So Fille Harmonique was a group that came together in me and Anthony's first year in electroacoustics in 205.
Yeah.
There's this assignment for live electroacoustics where you have to make a group and create a live piece. And me and Anthony formed a group called Shattered Wine.
Yeah.
And there was a group of girls in our class. Sorry to correct myself. I believe it was a group of girls and non-binary students. Trying to remember the original composition of the group, but they formed this group. They called themselves Fille Harmonique, and they composed a piece, and it was really great. And I, started making connections with Julie Matson, who had extensive connections in the ambient scene here in town, and had formed this Fille Harmonique group, as well as Danielle Savage, who's a great EA composer and also working in all of her stuff from folk music, called the stuff Olacado, who's a really talented EA musician, violinist, Zoe Warren, who's really talented, working saxophone and electronics, and Flo Bribois, who's now doing an MA at University of Montreal in electroacoustics, but she's really talented, already has a lot of connections with the ambient scene and in the experimental music scene and all these things. And so I was asked if I wanted to perform with Fille Harmonique, and I did. And we had a wonderful experience of getting to open Suoni del Popolo, which was a festival which happened at Sala Rosa, which is a venue here in town. And we got to work with some early experimental cinema footage and create this wonderful EA experience there. And I also was, lucky enough. Julie was still living here, Montreal at the time. She's now back in British Columbia. But while she was here, we were able to go to. She had a studio and a living space that was located outside of the city. We could all, go and work on recordings out there, and have the wonderful experience of the outside the city, which is a very different soundscape, both to work in and to record.
Completely different.
But Fille Harmonique was really founded on that initial sort of feeling of, EA is so deeply male dominated,
Right.
And we felt that we should band together and work with each other and really work on expanding each other's fields, and have a safe space to express all that.
Going back to the Columbia thing,
Yep.
we're not going to just talk about audio. We're going to touch on subjects that are important to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
And I really want to ask this correctly and properly, but you touch a very, very true point. That's you have to be blind to not see it, that audio, electroacoustics, this field is very, very dominated by cisgendered white male.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
Who I see the most at work, at the studio.
Yep.
And I want to ask you, as someone who is gender fluid,
Mm-hmm.
what has it been like for you?
Mm-hmm.
And also, I want to ask you, for someone who maybe knows they're gender fluid inside
Mm-hmm.
and still hasn't come out to say it, who's still maybe hiding it because they don't know how it would be accepted.
Mm-hmm.
In this field and everything you've done, what has that been like for you, and what would be your advice for someone who would be in that type of situation? I really want to hit this and give it all the time it needs and all the attention it needs. Be very detailed about this, because I think I don't hear enough people talking about it. I feel like it's almost like a thing where people don't want to bring it up. They brush it under the rug. They don't want to mention it. I really let's do this all the way.
Yeah, no. Thank you for asking it, because it is something that needs to be discussed. My experience, it was very very sort at the beginning. It's always it was a struggle in terms of as I'm sure our listeners can assume through the sound of my voice and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
initially within electroacoustics, it was kind of assumed I was a male composer, and there was a lot of struggle I found with that, and kind of this initial sort of sense of it's imposter syndrome of like what that where people assume you are, and what you actually are, even though I was out as gender fluid. I came out in high school. I was lucky enough that I was able to come to the realization early in life, and so I was already out and had changed my name and all of that jazz before I came into Concordia. So I was lucky in that regard, but it was definitely difficult at the beginning. It's this imposter syndrome of where people sort of assumed I was, and then as people become aware, whether or not you're already out, isn't always it isn't always the first conversation you want to have with anybody, really, especially not in an audio perspective or a perspective for schooling, where you don't know how much of this person do you want in your personal life, or like how much is even safe to discuss with these people. And there's definitely some bad apples in mine and Anthony's year that caused a lot of friction.
Absolutely.
And we definitely had our fights, both with the faculty and with other students. Sometimes it's people just not being aware, which I don't know. Like it's crazy to me as a non-binary person that you can come into the space and not notice the gender disparity. But if you're not necessarily, if it's not always, you don't always notice, systems of inequality unless they're negatively affecting you. And so,
Yes.
It's work of just like, meeting people where they are, and talking with faculty on like, talking with other students as well, like, does this come from a place of malice? Like, are you actively transphobic? Do you not believe that my gender is real? Or is it just ignorance? Is it a language barrier? I had conversations with faculty where it was, they had problems with they, them pronouns, and it, wasn't necessarily anything other than just translation issues. And having these conversations, while also myself, I was involved with a project in the Women's Studies department at the wonderful Simone de Beauvoir Institute at Concordia, on working to alleviate some of these issues and talking about how much of it is an issue of the fact that these systems are stopping women and non-binary people from coming into the field, and how much of it is like actively programming in this way, and how much of it is just the fact that it's really hard to see yourself in these fields already, for these groups. And if you don't see yourself in something, you're not necessarily going to see it as an option, as something to study or something that you can go into. And audio is very much a boys' club in that regard. And there are lots and lots of really incredible women and non-binary people and trans people throughout history. Delia Derbyshire, Wendy Carlos, Pauline Oliveros, all these people who aren't necessarily covered in the traditional electroacoustic curriculum, and aren't necessarily seen to people. I knew about Delia Derbyshire because I was a Doctor Who nerd as a kid. Thanks Tumblr for getting me exposed to these people like this that we don't talk about in the EA program. And it has gotten better, because the staff are more aware of needing to present these things. And I think more and more people are coming around to it, and there's increasingly more opportunities for gender diverse
I
groups
still
to
think we
get
have a long way
involved
to
in
go,
audio.
though.
100%. Concordia, Concordia Electroacoustics is still by gender, less diverse than a lot of places that people don't necessarily even, normally think of as diverse places. There are more women in computer science, by percentage at Concordia than there are in electroacoustics. And computer science is also a field that is traditionally very male dominated. And, electroacoustics takes on all of this. You're working with computers, you're working with music, which is already, very male dominated. And it's just like bringing people's awareness to a point that they're thinking about these things, that they are reforming stuff, working on talking with people about programming. But it's still hard. And I mean, you're still going to end up with a lot of shit from people who, don't necessarily know better or are actively malicious, or, they're just trying to, it is some, weird personal hang up that they have. They want to prove that they're super care about some weird, rational, quote unquote, rational, compositional aesthetic, or a certain way of presenting yourself that, may not necessarily be attractive or interesting to non-binary composers and, gender diverse composition groups, that then, isn't something that then, you see yourself in, so you don't come to work with it. And it's a leaky pipeline, all the way up. I was lucky that, when I was interested in coding and so forth, nobody told me no. Nobody told me not to study that stuff. I mean, when I studied dance, I spent years studying dance, and then eventually, switched into doing hockey. Not because I wanted to do, I should retake that. When I was interested in, I was doing dance as a kid. I did dance for several years and then went into skating. Not because I was interested in skating, but because, most of the other quote unquote boys my age, had done hockey. And, it was a point of getting bullied as a kid. And, I was definitely in a privileged position to not have that with my music and so forth. And I wasn't expected to, switch out of those fields. But, there are wonderful initiatives and like lots of support groups for these things. Sound Girls is a wonderful international initiative that is great for, networking and, finding groups where you can talk about these things. And, also just talk about general audio stuff to, peers that are of a similar mind and, aren't all, cis white men, which, means a lot, because it's also, this technical stuff it's hard. You're only ever going to get good if you feel comfortable asking questions about stuff. And I mean, I was lucky enough, both through, the experiences I was getting, but also that, mostly like my questions weren't being shot down. And if I was made to feel dumb, I got over it. But that is not the experience that a lot of the gender diverse colleagues that I have feel, either that they have or that they don't necessarily even feel comfortable, going to some dude who might be, super technically knowledgeable, but, they might dismiss them over some gender discrimination, or, just because the language that they're using doesn't necessarily line up with things. And I mean, people are, as I said, getting better with, being conscious of inclusive language and, starting to realize that, we are in the field. We are here, and that, we've always been here. It's not a new thing. We're not taking your jobs. We just want to, have a seat at the table and be able to work just the same as everybody else, and that we're just as technically competent as somebody else with the same amount of experience and the same background. And it's, I think, it's a much better place for people to come out now. Obviously, you have to consider your own safety, which, sounds very ominous, but, if you're in a workplace that doesn't necessarily support it, or, often a family situation. It took a very long time to get some of my family on board, and a lot of them still aren't, just on the gender question and the gender topic. And so, it's not necessarily something that you want to rush into, but I think increasingly more people are understanding that, identities are fluid and sexuality is fluid, gender is fluid. And so, you can start small and, find people that you trust to come out to, and, you can find friends that, want to help you, pick a name. If that's something you want to do, you don't have to. This is a big thing. Transition is not the same for any one individual or any two individuals, sorry. And, everybody's journey is going to look different. And there's no real timeline to do any of this. I know plenty of people who've come out in their 40s and are, living incredibly happy and fulfilling lives now that they're, true to who they feel they are, who they're true to their selves, their self-identity. And so, it's never too late to come out. And it's never too late to, change your pronouns, change your name, tell people, that you want to try stuff out, and, that you aren't necessarily exactly committed to one thing, and, you never have to be pigeonholed in one thing. And it's, just continuing to be open and, hopefully finding people who are willing to work with you for that. Sadly, you do have to be a bit picky with some of the audio jobs you take. It's good to know what the organizations are like, and, how they treated their employees in the past, and, talking to other people about, how things are right now. But, just because you see a gender gap in a field right now, doesn't mean that, you can't be, in that field. There's nothing stopping you other than, the resources that you have access to in terms of, time and money, but, also just, putting your own work into it. You can become quite accomplished in, just about any field you put your mind to.
And I just want to comment on that like you are the exact proof of that. You are the proof of that. You are living proof of what you just said. Like, I know you know that, but I want the listener to know that as well, to really, in this moment, hear what Kasey said and know that Kasey has accomplished so much in this field where the gender gap is super wide, So I really want to bring that point home. Please continue, Kasey.
Thank you. And, to that point, is that you, it's incredibly rewarding to be doing well in the field, not just from the usual, it's nice to have my pieces played at concerts, and it's nice to be able to pay my rent, and, these sorts of things. But it's also the fact that, as a non-binary person who is out, I have had the wonderful experience of, teaching youth, and, having other colleagues who, come out after the fact and say, you being out and you being true to yourself, and, being good in your craft, and, showing other people that you can do it. It means a lot to them as well. And it's endlessly rewarding, to, see that you are having that positive effect on the community. And that, other people feel emboldened to, even, just do a little bit of audio editing, or, change the way that they listen to music, or change the way that they think of composition, or any of these things. And it's, deeply, deeply rewarding. But you have to be able to be out to yourself first, and, be at that level, to then start coming out to other people. And then, it's just starting to take those first steps, and those first steps don't have to be huge.
What can we do and I'm talking about audio people here. Mm-hmm. What can we do to best support your people?
Well, the first thing is to be open, and to be willing to listen. It's also being willing to pass the mic, which, I'd like to think we're doing a pretty good example of now.
Yes.
You don't, if there is, somebody from, a group that is not very well represented, audio is also incredibly white, and incredibly, Northern Hemisphere focused for what is dominant in our culture and what is taught in our schools and so forth. Being able and willing to, pass the mic, to, these underrepresented groups and let them talk for what they feel is important and should be done. And, being able to listen, being able to admit when you're wrong. And, if someone calls you out on like, hey, this isn't okay, hey, these aren't my pronouns, my pronouns are they, them. I'd like if you, use them in the future to, not get offended and, not take it personally and, take it as a chance for you personally to grow, and to be more aware of these things. And, it's also, incredibly, helpful for, you to be able to, take this out of the workplace and, bring it back to your own personal life, even if you aren't personally trans, if you question, what does gender mean to me? And, what does my gender expression mean? And, even if you come to the conclusion that you're cis, you've at least made an effort, to, start that understanding, and you've, questioned, what it means to identify as a certain gender, or identify as a specific sexuality. And, that can help you, better empathize with other people when they're expressing these concerns. And, as I touched on listening, it's also, not invalidating, minority groups when they bring up their experiences about the field. Don't say that, oh, well, that hasn't been my experience, or, this is untrue. This professor treated me very well, so they can't have been mean to you. Being able to admit, your experience is going to be different than theirs.
Yes.
And so, it's, your experience isn't necessarily indicative of what they're experiencing. It's very useful to listen to them and understand all these things. Just also, start working on making your workplaces and the places that you are in, more inclusive, and more open, even if it is an all male, workplace. Correct people when they don't use the right pronouns, or, call them out if they're, bringing up misinformation about, a gender or a sexual orientation, or, if they're making homophobic or transphobic jokes, or all these things. Obviously, check in, if you do have the chance to have your colleagues who are identify in these sorts of ways, check in with them to see, what are you comfortable with? Are you comfortable if I correct other people about your pronouns? These sorts of things. But yeah, try and be the best ally that you can. Listen to people and just, fight for the cause when they can't be there. Because it is exhausting to be the person who has to fight the cause all the time, which is often what we see of, gender diverse people in audio, is that we burn out because, not only are we trying to juggle, this crazy intensive creative workflow where you're expected to, work an 18-hour day, 3 days, right. 3 days a week, or, 7 days a week, in some of these really, really arduous work conditions. Well, you're also, arguing about gender representation and, spending all this emotional energy correcting people. It's great to have allies that, can do it for us, on the days that we're tired, or, we don't necessarily catch something because we just, didn't hear it right away, or, we're paying attention to something else. Also, if you're in the position to, point out the disparities and convince your employers to, do something about it. Prioritize hiring more gender diverse people, etc. It goes a long way, because, once you get people in these jobs, as I said, they can see themselves in it, and then it's a positive feedback loop. They know that they can get involved because they see other people like them doing it. And then they get involved, and then other people see them doing it, and they know that they can get involved. And, it's a war of inches. And, I'm lucky that I have some colleagues who've written some really great research papers on the topic. So, there's definitely more attention coming to it. But, it's still a struggle. And hopefully people are getting more aware of it and do more to help the cause.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's just like, I'm really happy we had this conversation.
Yeah.
I'm really happy this point was brought up. This is something that needs to be discussed and needs to be described. And I think that your words are going to be written in stone, in the sense that there's probably someone out there listening to this right now who's like moved by this, and that this is like to help you, and to know that you can work in audio. It doesn't matter what gender you are, what race you are, what's your sexual preference, who you're attracted to, what you look like. This is a field for everyone, everyone. Right. And that's like a message that I really want to like showcase. Please go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say this is an audio field. This is not a gender field.
Exactly.
I have noticed some probably I've caught some of my colleagues just calling somebody by the wrong gender just because they read the name and they're not sure, so they just choose one. And I've caught myself correcting them, and I just don't know what else to do other than correcting them. And just when I'm not sure,
and that's like the normal thing to do.
That's the normal thing to do. It's just when you're not sure and you don't have the opportunity to ask at that moment, just use them.
I think we covered a lot here. Oh, yeah. We really covered everything that I wanted to discuss. I have one final question for Kasey. This is kind of the question that I'm making this a tradition right now. We're going to ask this at the end of every episode to every guest. But before I ask you this question, is there anything else you wanted to discuss, or obviously there's going to be a part where you can promote projects and stuff. That's going to be after the question. But is there anything else you wanted to like say right before this question, or are you?
We've hit a lot of topics, and I'm pretty happy with them.
So. Perfect. So this is the question on Soundspace that we're going to ask all of our guests. Guests. Hands and fires. What is your advice to people who want to get into the space of sound?
My advice is really just go for it. The tools are out there, and they're relatively accessible. You can, Reaper is free, in air quotes.
Yeah, air quotes are definitely attached.
Yeah, but it's but also like don't think that you need to be limited by if you don't have access to a computer. It's incredible what you can do with a smartphone, or access to even a library computer. You can use a DAW in a browser at this point. There's some really great DAWs that just run in the browser, and they're free to use. So, it's just to, start getting into it, start playing, just see, what catches your interest, and, start pursuing those. And, if it's something that it catches your fancy and it's something that you want to do, I'm sure that as you follow what you're interested in, you'll find other spaces where, you might need to get a bit more technical and learn about stuff that, might not be super exciting to you at first, but can be super exciting down the line. And, it can really help you get a finalized piece together, even, if it's just, editing together a little podcast, or, recording sounds, or, I even as a kid, I remember, there was like apps on the iPod Touch that you could get where you could make soundscapes. There's a bunch of free recordings, and you could just turn the volume up and down. There's all sorts of ways to get into it, and there's no right way to get into it, and there's no right way to think about it either. You don't have to know music theory. You don't need to know circuit theory. You don't need to know, exactly 100% how everything works all the time.
Absolutely.
You can pick that all up as you go.
Casey, I wish you gave me that advice before I started the program. Honestly.
Anthony's like, what? I could use a darn Google Chrome?
Oh, yeah.
What?
No, I mean-
I've been doing it all wrong. I've been using Logic all this time.
Oh.
Yeah, no, but
No, absolutely.
that was well said. That was,
Perfect.
Oh,
So
thank you,
let's
thank
wrap things
Yes.
up. This has been another episode of Soundspace. I'm very happy to have had you on, Casey. Thank
Yeah.
you so much. This is
Thank you for inviting me.
this is gonna
Casey, honestly.
no, honestly, thank you. Like, we're gonna have to top this on the next episode, and this is gonna be impossible.
Honestly, we're
Yeah.
so honored to have you on as our first
Yeah.
guest.
Seriously,
it's been
very
great
honored.
catching up with you, getting
Yes.
to know you better, getting to know what you've been up to.
Yes.
We're really happy.
Oh, thank you. And I mean, now you get the joys of getting to edit this down, which
Yes.
will be a challenge. But you've got the tools and the skills, so I'm excited to see how this
have
comes
Google
together.
Chrome.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I could probably use my phone. Yeah.
Oh, 100%.
I'm gonna use my iPad.
Yeah.
I'm gonna run this recording from Reason into Logic through Reaper, and then I'm gonna make a max patch.
Yeah, exactly. And then, write some sort of weird C++ code that exports it to a WAV file at the end.
Binaural.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh.
Great. Okay. Perfect.
Thanks
So,
for having me. In
absolutely.
terms of pluggables, you
Yeah.
want me to
Please
plug
go
stuff?
ahead. Please go ahead.
So you can find me. I mean, I've got recordings up on Bandcamp, which is just kpocius.bandcamp.com. So that's KPOCIUS. I'm Kasey.Pocius. That's KASEY.POCIUS over on Instagram. And you can find more of my live stuff on YouTube. Just search my name, Kasey Pocius. Hopefully I'll have more things on other streaming platforms by the time this comes out. I'm working on the headache that is actually publishing stuff in spatial audio formats. And I'm sure I'll have links sent to you by the time that this goes up with that information. Otherwise, you can find the rest of my stuff through those things. I'm on GitHub and other places if you really want to get into the technical weeds.
Yes, and Casey's super easy to talk to, everyone. So please reach out. You take the time. Take the time. Definitely take the time.
It's always a pleasure talking to Casey. There's always something to talk
learn.
about. And to learn.
So,
Thank you.
absolutely. So yeah, the podcast is, as we're recording this, we still don't have social media ready, but everything for the podcast will be linked in the description. For myself, I am at Jaian Music on social media. JaianMusic.com is my website. Freelance audio engineer. If you need podcast editing, mixing, mastering, sound design, I am the guy for that. And then just my YouTube channel, youtube.com/JaianMusic, where I do my other podcast, Anime Podcasters. By the time you're listening to this, Chip Machine has put out Spectrogram Ghosts, which is the latest album for that electroacoustic music project. Lunatic Rappers is a thing that I'm putting out singles for, so make sure you check that out. And yeah, that's me. What about you, Anthony? Where can people find you?
For me, at the moment, you can find me on Instagram as at Caci.audio, and that's ACACI.audio. And on Spotify, it's Caci, ACACI. And you can find me here at
Yes,
at
found you.
Soundspace.
Yes, there you are.
Yeah, that's
right in the server.
I'm gonna plug this own channel.
Exactly. I'm here right now.
We'll get the Discord link going.
All right.
So,
Yeah. Oh, the Discord's gonna be more for guests.
Okay.
This is gonna be like a network for people who've done the podcast. They can connect with other audio people.
Perfect.
So that like in like 2023, if they're Casey, where's Casey? Casey's on this Discord server. Go talk to Casey. You know. So yeah. Thank you all so much. So for myself, Anthony, and Casey, this has been another episode of Soundspace. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.